As your program chair, I'm excited to introduce our speaker today. Hector Martinez is the manager of the E3 Matched Savings Program at Casa of Oregon and has been doing that role for the last 5 years. He's a first-generation Mexican-American college graduate and has a degree in communication from Portland State University and certifications in IT. Before moving to Portland to attend PSU, he was the program coordinator and a branch manager for the Boys and Girls Club in Salem, Marion, and Polk counties. And his experiences there led him to his career in nonprofit work. When he's not at work, you might find him hiking, playing table tennis, or trying out restaurants. So please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Hector Martinez.
All right, thank you. That sounds amazing, spoken out loud. All right, so like Lucas mentioned, my name is Hector Martinez. I am the manager of the E3 program at Casa of Oregon. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about my organization, Casa of Oregon, the E3 program, and IDAs. So with a show of hands, does anyone know what an IDA is, an individual development account? Okay. It's a little better than I thought. I'm used to kind of people just giving me this blank look, so good start so far. All right, so I think we're going to start out big here, talking about the org first, and then kind of focus in on E3 at the end. So Casa of Oregon is a big nonprofit here in the state. Maybe you've heard of us. We tend to have a pretty broad range in the services that we provide. But they're kind of divided into two. So the other team that I'm not a part of, but that does great work, is our kind of real estate housing team, essentially. And so they do a few different things, actually. The first and foremost is that they actually help organize co-ops in mobile park homes. So for those of you that don't know, a co-op is essentially when everyone that lives in a area or development, or in this case a mobile home park, they all come together to become co-owners of the land and the place. And so this started in reaction to, I guess, like developers would come in, buy the land under them, and kick everyone out, and many folks didn't have a place to go or the funds to move and things of that nature. So at this point, Casa of Oregon has helped develop or organize dozens of co-ops throughout the state, and they continue to do so. Along with that, they also help with affordable housing, so they'll help in the development process of developing apartment buildings, townhomes, I think even single-family homes as well, in a way that is affordable for low-income, low-resource folks. And then we are also a CDFI, so we do lending for other orgs and things like that, so that they can achieve those similar goals as well. So now on my side of things, on my team, we're called the Family Economic Opportunity Program, or FEOP, as we like to be called. And we help folks in, I think, in a bit more of a direct manner. Our goal is to help low-income, low-resource folks to build assets, create generational wealth, and things of that nature. And the way we do that is mostly through the IDAs, which I will be talking to you here in a sec. And we kind of have two vehicles in order to do that. We have the VITA network, which I will talk about here in a sec, which is essentially a network of, I think, about 45 orgs throughout the state of Oregon, as well as our in-house IDA program, which I run. So, Oregon is actually a pretty special state when it comes to IDAs. Oregon has one of the biggest IDA programs in the whole country. I think there's only 2 other states throughout the country. I think Arizona is one of them, and there's another state out in the East Coast that has a pretty big program. So that's important to know. Oregon is a leader when it comes to these programs. And part of the reason we're so big is because IDAs have been in Oregon for over 20 years at this point, with the Oregon IDA Initiative, which is essentially a state-funded program. So we are funded by the state, among other sources of funding. So what are these individual development accounts that I keep talking about? Okay. Well, first off, to start thinking about them, here's kind of a little visual that shows what exactly their purpose is for, what exactly they help with. And so you can see here a few categories is we help folks purchase a home, we help folks purchase a vehicle and if they're in need in order to get to work or things like that. We help folks start businesses, and one that's actually kind of new and experimental is we help folks that are kind of behind on their retirement investments to kind of get a windfall of sorts to kind of catch up, right? And then lastly, of course, E3 is specifically a post-secondary education IDA program, so we help folks pay for college, essentially, okay? So how is it that we do that, all right? So another way to describe an individual development account program is a match savings program, okay? So essentially, participants in E3 or any other program will will open a savings account and will save to a preset determined goal, whether that's $500, $1,000, $3,000, over a set amount of time. Again, it could be as short as 6 months or up to 3 years. And essentially, the program will match their savings, typically at a rate of about 5 to 1. This means that someone that saves $3,000 can get, in theory, matched with $15,000 for whatever goal they have, whether that's their retirement, buy a home, vehicle, etc. Sounds amazing, right? Along with reaching their goal, their savings goal, the only other requirement that these folks have to complete in order to receive the funds is that they have to complete a few hours of financial education. So not only are we giving these folks the funds that they need to accomplish their goals and build wealth, but then we're actually teaching them how to manage that wealth once they have received it. So the folks that are in the IDA programs will learn about credit building, lending, you name it, taxes, investments, even just some things that sometimes we find are very simple, like even just how to save, how to budget. All those kinds of things they have to learn while they get through the program, which is personally one of my favorite aspects of running this program is seeing these folks learn financial literacy. So you can see here, these are kind of the details here of how the program works. So IDAs are a needs-based program, so there are income limits to who can join the program. So there are annual income limits for the household, and there is a net worth limit of $20,000. However, we don't count the first home, so we don't count it as an asset, but we also don't count the debt, and then we don't count the first vehicle that the household owns, and I believe we don't count the first $60,000 in retirement as well. So I will say that 95% of the folks that think that they're eligible for the program and apply do typically end up being eligible through these requirements here, which is cool. As you can see here, the hours of financial education varies depending on the program, and also the categories also vary too, right? So if you're in post-secondary education, maybe you need to learn more about banking, saving, credit, compared to someone that's to start a business, right? Maybe you're going to have different courses for that kind of thing. Maximum saving is $3,000, and I believe it can be as low as $250 or $500 depending on the person's goal. Match rate is 5 to 1, like I mentioned. So if you save $3,000, you can get matched $15,000, like I mentioned earlier, which is cool. We'll talk about E3's match rate here in a little bit. Our match rate is actually higher because we're special. But you can see here, the savings period can be as short as 6 months. If someone can save $1,000 in 6 months and they want to get through the program as quickly as possible, they can do that, which is great. Or they can take a little longer if need be. They can do up to 3 years. And the cool thing too is that we allow 2 accounts per lifetime. So in theory, someone that signs up for E3, for example, to help them pay for college, after they graduate, they can find another org that does a home ownership IDA, and then now they can receive help to buy their first home. So that's another favorite aspect of mine when it comes to these programs. So starting out big here, we have the VITA network essentially. So Casa of Oregon, we receive the funds through the Oregon IDA initiative, and we use some of those funds to fund E3, of course, but we also send out those funds to a network of 45 organizations throughout the state so that they can host their own IDA programs. And then it is up to them to decide what category, maybe the folks that they're helping out really need to buy homes, or the folks that they're helping out really need to buy cars or pay for school, They get to decide essentially what is best for their clients. Ooh, I look very color. No problem. And so you can see here, there's a link to our website here, where we have a huge directory where folks can go on there. They can filter through what category they're looking for specifically, and they can find which org is kind of in their area and able to help them. And here's kind of a very basic basic example of some of the orgs that are in the network. Raise your hand if you've heard of at least one of these orgs. Awesome, yeah. Like I said, there are 45 orgs throughout the state of Oregon and counting. Every year we add a couple more. Every year more orgs hear about IDAs and want to offer them as a service to their folks. So network is constantly growing, demand is constantly growing, and it's great to see. So kind of focusing in more on what I do specifically. So I run E3, which stands for Earn, Educate, and Empower. And so E3, we're actually partnered with the Oregon Alliance for Independent Colleges and Universities. So we're partially funded by the Oregon IDA Initiative, and we're partially funded by the OAICU, which I actually believe their office is here on the Pacific University campus. Funny enough, I should probably go say hi after this. But because we are specifically partnered with the OAICU, we specifically work with students that attend schools that are in that alliance. So you can see here, these are the schools that we are currently working with: Bushnell, UP, Willamette, Warner, Corbin, Linfield, Lewis and Clark. So we are all up and down the state, all up and down the Willamette Valley. And as you can see here, we've actually been partnered with Pacific University before, and George Fox as well. I've actually been here on campus before, spreading the good word of E3 to the students directly and stuff. So, like I mentioned earlier, E3 is special. We're kind of we're very unique when it comes to IDA programs, and part of that reason is because we are partnered with the Oregon Alliance for Independent Colleges and Universities. Our eligibility requirements are the same as any other IDA program. However, well, it's actually not up here, but one of the eligibility requirements is that folks need to be Oregon residents, right, because we are funded by the state. However, because we have a bit of additional funding from the Alliance, we get to make a little bit of space for out-of-state students as well. Though a lot of those out-of-state students tend to need help sometimes. College can be more expensive when you're coming from out-of-state, right? We also do up to 8 hours of financial education. However, it's typically split, into sections of 4. And that actually coincides with our model is a little different. Our model is a little more of a short bursts instead of a full 3 years of saving. So the way it works is that a student can save up to $500 over the course of 6 to 12 months. Typically, most students do the shortest 6-month period, and we match them at a rate of 6 to 1. So we give them $3,000 for their $500, and then the $3,500 gets transferred directly into their student account at their school, and they can immediately re-enroll again. And they can do it up to 4 times. So this means that we can potentially help them pay up to $14,000 in tuition over the course of 2 to 4 years, depending on how quickly they get through the program and re-enroll and do it all over again. Yeah. Did I miss anything? No. Cool. So like I mentioned, earlier, we are partially funded by the Oregon IDA initiative, which is, we got to have lobbyists and folks that go there and talk to, legislation and see if we can get funding and things like that. We had a few rocky years, I will be honest with you, and the pandemic definitely inhibited us a little bit. We're starting to kind of catch up there, things are starting to get a little better. But there's always, room to help. The same goes with the Alliance. Some years they're doing pretty well with their funding, and they can help out more, and other times they tend to struggle a little bit as well. So if you're interested in helping the E3 program or IDA network in general, there's a few ways you can do that. The first is that you can donate to the E3 program directly. Or if you're interested in any of other Casa of Oregon's programs, any of them like struck you, you can feel free to donate to Casa of Oregon, as a whole org, and I'm sure we can sort things out on our end. The other way that I think you might find interesting is that you can essentially sponsor a school, like the school that we're here right now. Pacific University, like I mentioned, they were a part of the program when it first started. But we had to change the model after the first year or two, and we changed it so that the schools also pay us an admin fee to essentially case manage the student from start to finish. And so essentially they have to pay a $600 admin fee per student. And so when they pay the $600 admin fee, and essentially they get $3,500 back, 6 to 12 months later. So it's a pretty good investment, about a 500 to 600% return. But just the way some of the schools' budgeting works and things like that, I guess it just didn't quite work out with Pacific University, and they weren't able to continue with the E3 program. So essentially, if you would want to sponsor Pacific University as an example, if you were to donate a simple $12,000 a year, that's enough to pay for 20 students' admin fees, which would bring in $70,000 to the school in just 1 year, 6 to 12 months. Additionally, you could donate to the Oregon Alliance for Independent Colleges and Universities. Like I mentioned, they have an office here on campus. Their main office is here somewhere, actually. I need to check in with them. And they often, like I mentioned, when things are good on their end, when they've got extra funding and things like that, they've actually sponsored the schools themselves. They've like subsidized the admin fee or paid that admin fee altogether for the schools, which is great. And lastly, one way you can help is to spread the good word about E3s and IDAs. Like I said, IDAs have been in Oregon for 20 plus years, yet the majority of the time that I mention an individual development account to someone, they have no idea that these exist and that this opportunity is there. And quite frankly, a lot of times when I explain the program to them, they're like, okay, there's got to be a catch. This sounds like a scam. It sounds too good to be true. And I agree, it sounds too good to be true, but this is one of those instances where in reality it is very, very true. I hope that Willow can attest to that. So yeah, and we also have our own website, e3savings.org. If you want to write that down, you can look at some basic information, how to get in contact with me. Same with casaoforegon.org. You can find us through our main website as well. And then lastly, I didn't create a slide for it, I apologize, but we actually also do a scholarship called the Sister Adele Scholarship, and it is specifically for students of farm worker families. And so I know being out here in Forest Grove, there's probably a lot of ties to farm work. So the application is due actually pretty soon here at the end of the month, but essentially a student can win between $1,500 to $5,000 depending on their application. So it is open to anyone that is an Oregon resident and wants to attend a university, a community college, or even a trade school. The scholarship will work for that as well. So if there's any interest in that, you can come talk to me after and I can lead you to the right website or something like that. I do have wrap cards, flyers for E3 as well if you want to grab one, and I have business cards with me as well if you'd like to grab one of those. Hopefully I didn't go over time. Any questions? Yes.
Is there a minimum age to participate in your programs?
That's a good question. Nope, no age. And so that kind of ties in with the retirement savings one, right? It's typically folks 40s, 50s that want to do that one so that they can kind of start to catch up. Yeah, and I think you do have to be 18.
Okay, yeah. For the
So
education piece.
there are other programs. There's one called the Match College Savings Program, which is kind of affiliated with us, and that one the students do participate when they're in high school and slowly save up until their freshman year of college. But that's probably the only case in which someone under 18 participates. Yes.
Historically, what I have seen when I'm doing my tax returns, I've seen donate to Oregon IDA. Is that still available when we're doing our taxes? Is that something we can still tell our accountants about, or that we want to donate to that? How do we do that?
I might have to get back to you on that one. I actually don't recall seeing that option when I did my taxes this past time. Yeah, you didn't see it either? Yeah, I know that it was on there for a while. I don't know how they get that on there or not. But yeah, keep that in mind. When you're doing your taxes, there's an option to donate to the IDA program. Yeah, and that's essentially how we get funded is tax credits. Folks like to donate to the Oregon IDA initiative, and they get good tax credits for the program. So
I had a question. So I know there's a financial education piece to this. Who provides the financial education, and what kind of topics are covered?
yeah, so it varies. Every org is going to have a different source for the financial education. However, the Oregon IDEA Initiative and Neighborhood Partnerships, which is the org that kind of administers everything, they've set like standards essentially of what what the org has to meet. But there's various sources. Some folks use online courses. One of those is like FDIC has a online free course for anyone who wants to do it. It's called Money Smart. E3 actually partially uses that as part of our curriculum. Some of the orgs use and they themselves have the capacity to be the financial educators, so they'll schedule times to have courses and go through it. And like I mentioned before, it depends on the category. So, folks that are trying to do a home buying IDA are probably going to take more like home ownership lessons, so what the basics of debt and mortgage and things like that are, credit building, whereas someone doing the college education IDA is probably going to learn more of the basics, like how does banking work, they're younger folks, how does a credit card work, things of that nature, so it varies.
I noticed it looked like in order to qualify that they also had to have at least 12 months of employment, is that right? Earned income in the past 12 months, I see that. I guess my real question has to do with the verification of that income.
Yeah, so basically the way that we check their income is, first and foremost, if they are employed, then we require 2 months worth of most recent pay stubs just to get a feel for what their income level is, and we ask that for anyone in the household. So, in the case of E3, if it's a student that still lives at home with the parents, then we're going to require all of their information. Whereas sometimes a student is already pretty independent, they're living on their own, they've got an apartment with roommates, in which case we're pretty much only going to ask for their information. And so that part where it says proof of capacity to save, the pay stubs will take care of that. If you've got income, then that's your proof. But essentially, folks that are not employed, and they don't have to be to participate in the program, they just have to provide us some sort of proof that they already have funds available to start making deposits. So typically what they'll do is they'll send a screenshot of of their bank balance or transactions, or oftentimes we'll have students that are like, I'm not employed yet, but I'm starting in the fall, I got a work study or whatever, and they can provide a letter from their work study provider saying like, hey, yeah, this student will start to work here in the near future. So
Is that an ongoing verification?
No, they have to verify just to apply and enter the program, and from that point on, they're good for the entirety of the time. That's a good question.
Do you have an idea of how many people that start meet their goal? and get the match? Kind of is it 80-20, does everybody do it?
Yeah, you all have great questions. I love it. So I can say with confidence, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in E3, we have a super high success rate, a super high completion rate. And I think a lot of that has to do with that it's kind of short term. You know, young folks they live life a little faster, right? They're a little more, I don't know what's the word, impulsive, impatient, whatever you want to call us, right? But because of their shorter stints, they're much more likely to stay involved, stay engaged, complete everything. I would say at least 90% of folks that enter E3 finish at least 3 times through the program. It's great to see. I'm essentially seeing these students, you know, grow up because some of them have been in the program 2 or 3 years. It's kind of cool seeing them learn and how well they like communicate to me year 3 compared to when they're freshmen, right? As far as the other orgs, I don't know what those numbers are. I think it varies. Some orgs, you know, probably sometimes have folks that tend to drop out or disengage or for whatever reason. And sometimes, unfortunately, folks have to take leave or take breaks, or they have to exit because an emergency happens and they need to take their savings back. It does happen. We try as much as possible to help them and be flexible so that they can continue on with the program, even if it means taking a break or extending their savings plan. I mean, we want to give these folks their funds. We want them to succeed, so we try to do anything we can to make sure that they stay in the program. But unfortunately, there's just, you know, we're helping low-income, low-resource folks, and, you know, a lot of times they encounter obstacles that, you know, unfortunately they need those $300 back or $500 back or whatever before they can actually finish and receive the match. But actually, we're starting to develop a new pilot program, which I think should be implemented soon, depending on the org. We're able to do an emergency match. So in those cases where those folks are like, hey, this came up, I really need the funds back, I'm not going to complete the program, we're like, hey, you stayed this much, we're going to go ahead and just match you this much and give you the match already. Like, you did the work, you deserve it. It's a shame that you've gone this far and you didn't get anything right. So just another way that we're trying to help out the folks in the community. Oh, sorry.
What does the administrative cost cover? Because 600 seems high for a program that only has a maximum of $500 savings required for participants.
I mean, it covers the case management from the point that they apply for the program to the time that they're opening the accounts. A lot of students encounter issues because it's their first time working with a bank, doing the financial education. Once they're finished, we ourselves are the ones who transfer the funds directly to the school, you know, things of that nature. And so it's a $600 admin fee, but it does include the savings, the $500 savings for the student, as well as a $3,000 match. So, yeah.
So, I have a question. You mentioned something about purchasing a car, purchasing a home.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Purchasing a car, purchasing a home for people who live. So if they had $500, do they do this every month, or do they do it one time?
So the minimum savings period is 6 months. So sometimes we have folks who are like, hey, I got those 500 right now. They're burning a hole in my pocket. I'm afraid I'm going to spend it. This happens a lot with students. And so folks, if they want to, they can do a one-time deposit of the $500. However, that does not speed up the process. They still have to wait that 6-month minimum savings period. And that minimum savings period was implemented essentially by the Oregon IDA initiative. There are some exceptions to it where in very specific cases it can be sped up a little, but essentially, yeah, it's like the minimum is 6 months and the minimum to save in those 6 months is $250 actually. They wanted to do only $250, so good. But again, this one, E3 is a little different in that we have kind of 4 separate savings periods where they save, receive the match, receive the funds, and then they re-enroll, save again, receive the match, you know. things like that. Whereas some of these other IDA programs, it's more long-term. So, you know, they're gonna save that up to $3,000 over the course of up to 3 years. So a lot of those folks will do, you know, $50 a month, you know, what have you, up until they reach that goal in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So.
And how soon is the payout when you finally reach that goal? Does it happen immediate, that month?
It can happen that same month if they're set to finish in February, as long as all requirements are met by, you know, about mid-February, for example, then by the end of February, the funds will be in their student account, or depending on the program, they will receive a check in hand. If they're buying a car, oftentimes we deal, or the board deals with the dealership directly and pays them directly on behalf of the saver. It depends, but the payout is usually pretty immediate, usually same month that the folks finish. And they don't have to use the funds all at once either. For example, with education, let's say a student finishes and their remaining student bill is only two grand. We can transfer just the $2,000 to pay off that bill for that semester, and they can hold on to the $1,500 for next semester. What have you? So there's a lot of flexibility there.